Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Swerve with me. This is a show where we have adult conversations for mature audiences only. I'm Miranda Innes, and I want to say a great big happy Father's Day to all of the men out there who are holding it down, who are doing your best to be the great fathers that you are, because after all, there's no manuscript. There's no manuscript. There's no book of rules on exactly how to parent, how to do it. You can watch from other people. You can read books that people have written, but the reality is, when you have that little person in your home and in your life, you have to learn how to manage and to learn their ways so that you can be the best parent that you could possibly be. Good night, Joe, but good to have you. So I wanted to talk to fathers today. I had a guest previously scheduled, and they couldn't make it. So it's going to be me and you again tonight, just talking about fatherhood, parenting. Of course, now I'm going to begin to share a little bit about my background and my father, in that regard. As you come in, please tag somebody else so that we can join the conversation, because I'm going to be relying on you to for input tonight, since it's only going to be me and you. We're going to have this conversation about fatherhood and parenting. And so my dad, who passed away in 2003, was, I made a post on Facebook today about him because I called him an anomaly, meaning he in essence was kind of like a contradiction. He had a stern rough side, and then he had this really soft side that perhaps I was the only person that saw, outside of his wife, I guess. But he was very, very, very stern and firm with my brothers, and perhaps even mean, if I think about it. But I never saw that side of him. I never got that kind of behavior from him. And I've come to understand as I got older, the fact that thank you, I love you too. Um, I've come to understand the fact that he was operating out of the basic skill set that he had. And while he wasn't very expressive in his love, saying it verbally, he definitely demonstrated his love to me. And by extension, my siblings, my older sister, my three brothers, through acts of service. And so we would have gone to the private schools, and he would have taken care of our day to day basic needs, the best he knew how. But I don't recall if he did ever him saying to me, I love you. And I know that's important, for a lot of people to hear. Well, I never heard it, but I believe I experienced the love through acts. I say his love language was acts of service. And so he did those things that, to the best of his ability, that a father would do. And then when we had our moments together, we would share all kinds of amazing things. And I wondered, and I had the opportunity to talk to him about the decisions that he would have made throughout the course of his life before he passed away, because my parents were married, but they separated shortly after I was born. So I wasn't parented in a two family home. But thank God for my grandmother, my aunts, and my uncles, by extension, that extended family, because we were raised on a different island, who all pitched in and did the best that they could to help to shape and form the person that I am today. So I want to salute those fathers out there who have not only raised their children, but taken on their wives' children, their spouses' children, and become a father to them too, and been able to blend families, because a lot of families, I don't even know how much a traditional family exists anymore, because there's so many blended families out there. Good night, Newton. Good night, Christine. Good to have you. There's so many blended families out there nowadays, and I think it's forced a lot of people in a position where they've had to co-parent. That's probably not the way that they originally intended it to be, but they've had to learn how to be adult, be mature, and to co-parent so that their children could have the best possible quality of life that they could afford to give. And I know it's not easy because I've seen so many people parent. So I want you, as we go throughout the night, to begin to share your memories, your stories of your father. Somebody just say something, whether or not you had a connection with him, whether you still do have a connection with him. And believe you me, you are blessed if your father is still alive, whether you are connected deeply or not, because you still have that opportunity. That's the reality. You actually still have an opportunity to connect. It's never too late. The only time it's too late is when he's no longer around for you to say those things. Good night, Delarice. Good night, Charlene. Roll. Nice to have you. So tonight we're talking about fathers. My guest couldn't make it, so it's just me and you. So I need you to jump in, comment, and let's hear some stories and share some things about your fathers. One of the fondest memories that I have with my father actually was as an adult, where, as your parents get older, for those of you who've had that experience, you begin to feel like you're parenting your parents. And that's kind of like where it came down the line as my father began to age, and he would depend on me for everything in his latter years. For the last, I would say, 20 years or so of his life, he lives in Florida, and he would call me when he had to make decisions. And he was married with his wife, but he would still call me and ask my opinion about everything that he would do before he did it. And so we had this kind of bond that I believe was really, really precious. And sometimes I would wonder, like, why is he calling me to ask me this stuff? And his wife is right there, right? But I miss that. I miss the moments when he would tell me all about the wonderful things that he had discovered, all these new things that he was doing, and he couldn't wait for me to come over so that he could show me and take me to these different places and enjoy all these wonderful things that he was experiencing at that stage in his life. And so I miss those moments of being able to hang out with him, of being able to have a male figure who actually loved me unconditionally, of being able to be in the presence of someone who, wow, starting to get a little emotional, to be in the presence of someone who made me feel safe, who made me feel secure, and who made me feel loved. And I really, really miss my dad for that. But I got to tell you, I'm really blessed because I have three amazing others who feel the same way about me. And they will definitely go down for me. And they will do and have done, demonstrated throughout the course of my life, because I am my father's last child. They have demonstrated that when I needed a big brother, when I needed a presence, when I needed somebody to support me, my brothers showed up, and they showed up strong and stood tall. And today, if I pick up the phone and I tell any one of them that I have an issue, they are going to do their best to try to help me resolve it. So shout out to my brothers, Godfrey in Toronto, Belfield in New Providence, and Sanford in Freeport, Grand Bahama. I love you guys, and thank you for just being good man, just being good man. And then I've been blessed because I have some amazing uncles in my life, my dad's brothers. And when he wasn't with us, in some way they kicked in. And so my uncle Paganini, you'll see we all have really unique names. My uncle Paganini was always there to help out with us. My uncle Cadmus, who is deceased as well, he kicked in, and he was the one who gave us money and gave us treats and all that kind of stuff. And then there was my uncle Earl, and anybody who lived in Grand Bahama and knew me knew my uncle Earl. He was such a tall, gentle giant, just one of the nicest, sweetest, kindest man that I've ever met in all my life. And he's deceased as well now. But I've been blessed with all of these amazing men in my life. So come on, let's hear, let's talk about our fathers. Let me see some comments. Joba says, I miss my father playing the guitar, jazz music to me, telling me all about life. Wow, that must have been a precious memory and experience. Now, my dad was certainly not musical, couldn't play any instruments. And as I think about it, I used to laugh at him when he danced, but he loved to dance. He absolutely loved to dance. And now just thinking about him moving, I just thought it was so funny. But he enjoyed life. He loved it. So I cherish those times with him. So Christine says, unfortunately, I never knew my father. He passed away when I was only 3 months. Wow. But thank God for my mother who introduced me to my heavenly father. And I'm grateful, just so grateful for my upbringing without a father. Yeah, Christine, you're not alone. You're not unlike thousands, perhaps millions of people who were just raised with that female figure. And I wasn't even raised with my mother. So that's another thing. But we're not talking about mothers tonight. But I was raised with strong women who, my grandmother and my aunts, like I said, they did everything within their power to ensure that myself and my siblings had everything that we needed to feel secure, to feel whole, and to have the best possible life. I'll say one of the things that I learned from my grandmother, and this is my paternal grandmother, by the way, my father's mom, because he lived off island at the time when we were growing up. He worked on a cruise ship, so he was out to sea, just working. And so my grandmother raised us after him, and my mother separated. But one of the things what I saw in the household, which really framed the person that I am, was professional women, because my grandmother was a nurse. She was a nursing officer, as a matter of fact. She had risen to the rank, I believe, nursing officer one. I think that's what it's called, or whatever. But she rose to that rank, and so I saw a professional woman. I saw work ethic in operation. I saw a woman getting up and going to work every day. My two aunts were also professional women. One later on in life, but they both were able to go matriculate to college and university. One went to school in New York and the other went to school in Florida, Daytona. And so I was able to get this firm sense of being able to be a professional woman, to take care of yourself, to work hard, and to be able not to depend on someone if you didn't have to, but to be able to carve your own way. And so I thank them for the impression that they had on my life. So tonight I'm talking about fathers. So those of you who have any stories that you want to share about your fathers, come on and chip in, and let's talk about fathers. So my dad was yeah, very, very interesting. But he showed up for all of the major events in my life. My graduation, of course, from high school, because again, we didn't live on the same island. My graduation from university, he was there, and all points in between. He supported, but he didn't know how to say I love you. And that's what I learned later on from my stepmom. One day we were having a conversation about him, as we often did. Um, Actually, when he got on her nerves, she'd call me basically and tell me talk to him, because he only listened to me. So she called me one day, and in her ranting and all that stuff, I said something, and she said to me, "I don't think you guys know how much your father really loves you." And that was the first time that I had heard something like that, because again, he never expressed the way he felt about us. But for me, he showed it. And so for her to say that, and to qualify it and quantify it by explaining how he would he talked to her regularly about his kids, and how much he loved us, and how much he wanted for us, and even the regrets that he would have had for not being able to do certain things for us and with us. Those are things that he was never able to express to us, but I was so happy that he was able to share those things with her. And which leads me to this point. For those of you who may not have had your father in your life at all, for whatever reason. I want you, and if you're still struggling with that, even as an adult, I want you to, for a moment, think about the conditions, if you know, under which he was raised. Think about, and if you are aware of the conditions under which he was raised, think about the challenges that he may have faced. Think about the support that he may or may not have had as a child himself. And particularly if he was a young father, um, think about the things that he didn't even learn before he became a father, and not even having the ability or knowing how to express himself and to say things for you for whatever reason. So as you begin to mature and you put things into perspective, there's a kind of crystallizing of things in your life that if you only open yourself to it, to the possibilities, and if you could push past all the things that he didn't do, if you could push past all the things that he didn't say, and if you can see any glimmer of light, any flicker of light in the midst of whatever experiences you may have had with your father, hold on to that. Or if you never had any, I'm telling you, and he's still around, you still have that opportunity. It makes no sense to walk around with a heart full of bitterness. And more importantly, when you don't even understand what happened, because my father never talked about why him and my mom separated. We don't know. I just know that that's what I was told, because I never saw them together. The only time that I ever saw my parents together in my lifetime, now listen to this, in my lifetime, was at my high school graduation and at my university graduation. The only two times. And when I saw them together, I understood why there was a Miranda and my siblings. I understood because I could still see the chemistry, even though they both had long gone on with their lives. But somehow, at that stage in their lives, they had gotten to a point where they were civil with each other. There was no tension. There was no apprehension. They were good together. They enjoyed the moments together. They celebrated the occasions together. Um, and yeah, so I appreciate that I got the opportunity to actually see them, to interact. And of course, I would hear the stories about each other from the individuals. And I got to say, they were never negative. They were never negative. I've never heard my dad say anything negative about my mother, and I never heard my mother say anything negative about my father. So those were the only occasions that I saw them together, but those are memories that I cherish. And so for those of you who still have that opportunity, whether you never knew him, whether he never came by, whether he mistreated your mother or whatever, if you could push past, because it's not even about him, but it's so much about the quality of life that you can have if you're able to release the bitterness or whatever issues there may be, if they exist, and just to try to develop a relationship with your father if he's still around, because you're an adult, so he can't parent you. He can't tell you what to do. He may be able to advise you if you take the advice, but I think it's just so much important so that you have an opportunity to have some kind of connection where you understand your why, where you get some information about your family dynamics and the background of things, why this happened, why this didn't happen, why you act the way you do, the traits that you have. If you have all of those questions and he's still around and he's competent and lucid and able to have those types of conversations with you, you may want to have that conversation with him because it's important. And particularly if you have kids and you have grandkids and whatever stage you are in your life, it's important to have those conversations. We need to know, we need to open more as a people. We need to listen more as a people, and we need to be able to Get some things from under the rug and get some skeletons out of the closet and begin to be honest. I think we as a people in our culture, we've been conditioned to kind of sweep things under the rug, to never talk about it, never approach it, because, of course, if these things were embarrassing, shameful back then, whenever the things happened in certain instances. But it's important so that we don't replicate and repeat the mistakes of the past. It's important that you begin to talk about these kinds of things. So I'm pleading, imploring those of you who still have that opportunity, do it. If not for yourself, do it for your children and your grandchildren, so they can have some sense of belonging, so they can have some sense of kinship with other people outside of the immediate people that you have them connected with, particularly if it's on the father's side of the family. Make a conscious effort to reach out, to reach out and connect with those people. Choba says they have some mothers that are mom and dad. God bless them. God bless those dads that are doing it all by themselves. Pressy says, "Happy Father's Day to my dad, who also played the guitar. He was a songwriter, gospel artist, and the leader of the Gospel Elevations, lead singer of the song My Lord is Riding." Okay, and happy first Father's Day to my brother Puzzle. Okay, we had a blast celebrating today. Thank God for another wonderful Father's Day. That's such a rich legacy, Pressy. Thank you for sharing that. And I think everybody knows your brother Puzzle. I think the birthday song, I think that's what I can remember that he sings or whatever. My birthday come again or something like that. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Good night, Mom. Beautiful my father. Thank God for fathers that can freely say to his children, "I love you." Yeah, that's important for a lot of people, because I believe for children, um, most children, it kind of frames their whole sense of I am loved, I am wanted, I am respected. Um, yeah, so it's important for the man out there, if you have an opportunity to say it, as uncomfortable as it may be, because your parents probably never said it to you. Um, Break the stereotype, break the cycle, and begin to say those words to your kids, because for many of them, it matters. It matters that they hear somebody saying, "I love you," and particularly their fathers. And then for those who of course, and we know these things, for those mothers who are raising kids, and people say they're doing it on their own, but the reality is you have a village. Whether you acknowledge the village or not, there's a village that exists, because they're the teachers in the schools. The children go to school and somebody else is pouring into them from 9 or 8 till 3 every day. So that's a village. By extension, I don't know if you have good neighbors. Maybe the neighbors are helping, or if you have siblings, or that kind of stuff. I don't know what the family unit is like. But even if you don't have family members, siblings that are participating in the lives of your children to help you raise them day to day, there are organizations that can help you. There are girls' clubs, there are boys' clubs, there's Boys Brigade, Girls Brigade, Scouts, Brownies. All of those organizations help. Those are the organizations that your children can get the mentorship and that extra time that you may not be able to put into them, or your grandkids, because you have to work and you just can't do it. So there are organizations that are out there to assist. I am big on saying you don't have to do it alone. You really don't have to do it alone. You don't have to live in isolation. You don't have to live in a silent. Of course, there's the church. For those churches that may have programs for children and youth, they can also participate in those type of activities and organizations. So you don't have to do it alone. There are people out there that are able to assist you. And so for fathers, anybody else has a story about their father, because I believe it's important. This is this opportunity to celebrate them, to acknowledge them. to let them know too that they are loved, they are appreciated, they are respected for whatever it is that they're doing. That's important. So for even all of the fathers to be, we want to encourage them in advance for playing a role in their children's lives, no matter what the conditions of birth, no matter what the conditions of birth. And I say that intentionally because a lot of times relationships don't work out as we see it. We just need to look around in our communities, and the relationships may not work out between the mother and father. That should not impede your obligation to deal with your children, to still love, respect them, and to treat them kindly, and to not just supply their needs in terms of monetary needs out of obligation, but to really make a commitment that because this is a part of me, this person, this is my seed, then I am going to make sure that not only what I didn't have, they have, but I'm going to make sure that I pour as much of me as I can to make sure that their lives, the quality of their lives, the decisions that they may make along the way, I want to make sure that they're able to make good decisions and that I do my part, because at the end of the day, all you can do is do what you know how to do. And you can learn. There are enough books, there are enough things on YouTube, there are enough conferences and virtual events, and there are enough things that you can get yourself educated and you can get yourself equipped to be able to manage. And what you don't know, ask somebody else who's probably already had the experience. They've already been through it and they may be able to assist you. So if there's anybody out there who has a story about their father that they want to share, come on, let's share it. I want to really, really impress upon those of you who have your fathers right now to make the best of the time that you have left with them, and even those mothers who may be single parents. If you've done all that you can to reach out to that man and to make him feel like not so much that he's wanted, but that he is necessary in that child's life, I believe you have an obligation to do that as well. He has an obligation to do what he can. But again, if he comes from a dysfunctional family himself and the kind of environment where nobody was there nurturing him and encouraging him, then you're going to have to step up in a major way so that your child can get whatever he or she needs as far as that identity and being able to connect with the father's side of the family for whatever that is worth. They need to know who they are. They need to know where they came from. They need to know why. They need to know their why. And you can help them regardless to whatever direction the relationship may have gone between you and the father. And so I am talking about fathers tonight. For those of you just joining me, I had a guest schedule, but the guest couldn't make it anymore. And of course, you know how we do. We just go, the show must go on anyway, and we just want to talk. So I want to salute and cherish those fathers who have done the best that they can, who have done the best that they can with the tools that they had. And I want to talk to the ones out there who may be struggling right now, who may be struggling right now. And can I tell you, men, we are sometimes very, very hard on men and very, very emasculating. And we're quick to condemn and point the finger and cut them down when they're not bringing the money, when they're not doing what, quote unquote, they should be doing. We are quick to do that. But how many times do you actually acknowledge when he does good? If he does, how many times do you acknowledge that? And then I'm going to say this thing and then duck after I say it. But again, this is a show where we have adult conversations. Women, the reality is you chose that man. You chose that man. If you weren't forcibly, raped, or the conditions were beyond your control, if it wasn't a situation where you were not in control and you were taken advantage of, then the reality is you chose that man. You chose that person who ultimately became the father of your child or your children. Yeah. And so if he's not acting right, if he didn't act right, if you had adult kids and all that stuff, I it's important to be is introspective and reflective, and it's important for you to own your part, the part that you played, because it wasn't all bad, and he wasn't all bad at the time when y'all were dating or you were married and you were loving him and whatever. There must have been some qualities, some good qualities, I do believe that you may have seen with it at the time. And we know life happens and people make bad decisions and things go different ways, but I'm talking to those of you out here and who will watch this show in the weeks and months ahead, that you have to remember that you made the decision to be with that person, and you didn't set out for things to go the way they did or end the way that they did, but you played a role some way in it. And so it's not all his fault. He didn't do it by himself. You played a role. Own that, acknowledge that, and accept that. Um, um, yeah, you had a part to play in it. So I think that just needs to be said, because I'm not one to male bash. I'm not going to do that, but I am going to speak to everybody concerned, because as adults, if we don't begin to acknowledge the mistakes that we've made, and particularly for those of you who have children and grandchildren, listen, I've said this before, but can you just be honest with those kids? Can you at some point in your life lay aside what maybe the shame or whatever it is? Can you at some point just say it? Just tell them, because they're going to make mistakes as they grow and they progress. And for those who have older children, they probably already made the mistakes that you've made, but you never told them you did. For those of you who have older kids. And so if you have grandchildren, my thing, I always say, you have a do-over. You have an opportunity to connect with those grandkids in a way that you wasn't, maybe because you weren't mature enough at the time yourself. You didn't know enough yourself at the time to talk to your own kids. But if you have grandchildren now, you're older, you're wiser, you've lived, and so this is an opportunity for you to have those kinds of conversations with your grandchildren that your parents didn't have with you and that you didn't have with your children. So you still have an opportunity to help these children to grow and to function in a dysfunctional world. That's what we're living in, a dysfunctional world. And might I add that if you don't take the time to speak to them about those things, someone will fill in the gaps. And the way how they fill in the gaps may not necessarily be the way that you would want them to find that information out. Pressy says, I salute all the fathers that are trying to do their best. They're trying their best to do right by God and by their children. Yes, I join you in saluting you. And then I want to thank God for the men that step up, for the pastors, who in some instances have had to be a father figure in the lives of some of those single mothers in their churches, and they've had to step up and help to rear and play a role in those children's lives, those single mothers. So I want to salute all of those pastors and any man that has taken the opportunity to help to pour into to somebody else's child that isn't theirs, that wasn't theirs. And you know who I want to salute? Those men who marry women with children. Those men who marry women with children, especially if the children are older and they're working to blend those families. Big shout out, big props to men like you who've stepped it up and you've decided that because I love this woman, I'm going to love her children too. And I am going to make sure that I raise them and I respect her and I respect them. And understanding the role that you play in their lives. And it's different when the children are different ages because I've known of occasions where men have stepped into children's lives when they were younger, and because they were younger, I wouldn't say it was easy, but I do believe it was easier for them to be able to connect with the children and to work with them in the home because they were younger and the kids still weren't as attached or bonded with their fathers as if you walked into a woman's life who already had teenagers who knew their father, or even if they didn't know the father, knew of the father. So stepping into a role like that has to be difficult. Has to be difficult because that he can't really be the father, in my opinion. I believe that at best what he can bring to the situation is being a friend, a strong male figure, and a support because that teenager, whether or not their biological father is actively involved in their life or not, they know they have an awareness of they have a father. And so you coming in as a male and trying to parent them, I'm sure that must be a major challenge for you. So I salute all of the men out there who are raising other people's children, because that's what it is. They're not your biological kids, but if you've stepped into that role, and I know women would say, hey, listen, you got to take all us if you want to be with me. And of course, that's true. If you have kids and he wants to be with you, then that comes with the package, but that's not an automatic. So I want to really single out those men who do that. That's a major step to walk into a woman's life and to help her to parent those children. That's a major step. I see my friend Jerusha here. Good night, Jerusha. Jerusha raised, listen to this, guys, 5 sons. 5 sons on her own. Their father died, and she raised 5 sons who are adult men right now. Imagine that. 5 sons. And she did the best that she could possibly do with the support systems that she had, but she did it. She pulled it off. 5 adult men right now. So men are so very important. Men are not only needed or wanted, men are necessary to support and to participate in the lives of their children. It's necessary. Yeah, Farida, it is amazing. She raised those 5 boys um, by herself with a support system and everything that she could do, but she did it. And all are present and accounted for. Everybody in their own lane doing whatever, but she did it. And I salute her for that. So, man, when you hear this, you're necessary. We need you. We need you to step up. We need you to be perhaps who your father wasn't to you for our kids. We need you to go beyond just being a provider. As most men, they're conditioned to do, yes, they need the money. They need the money, but they need you too. They need you attending the PTA meetings as well, and the games, and showing up for the big events, and even the little ones. They need you at the birthday parties, and just to sit down and say, "Hey, how you doing?" They need you to make the phone calls, because a lot of times, when children need things, I've seen this and experienced this in the past, with so many of my friends and relatives. When children need things, the first thing the mother tends to do is to say, "Call your daddy." When children need things, call your daddy. And then I've heard the father say, "Well, that's the only time I ever hear from my kids, is when they're calling me, asking me for something." Yeah. So, what that means then is, mothers, you need to do a better job of making sure that the child connects with him on a regular basis. Just sometimes to say, "Hey, daddy, how you doing?" Not just on those occasions when you need him to help you foot a bill or to pay for a bill, because that's what you relegate him to. And then he thinks he's just a cash machine, and he's not needed for any other areas of the child's life. And so, mothers, you have to be careful how you handle those men, and what you say, of course, before the children about the man, whether he's quote unquote a good father or a deadbeat, as we call it. But you have to be very, very careful how you frame what you say before those kids. Yeah, yes, Farida, it is priceless. The presence is, it's priceless. I think on those times and those moments whenever my dad was there. Like I told you, he made me feel safe. He made me feel secure, loved, protected, all of those kinds of things. And the thing that a man brings, in particular to his daughter's life, nobody else can do that. No one else can do it. It's just different. Everybody knows that. It's just different, with a father and his daughters versus a father and his sons. It's just different. So Elder Inslee says the Bible says, "Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long." So the father is very important, no matter what they do. Even if they are not there, they are still important, because without a father, there would be no mother. Absolutely right. It takes two. It takes two. And I think that scripture definitely is something that most of us have learned in Sunday school, and we would quote it. "Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee." Right? I was probably like 5 or 6 when I learned that scripture. The importance of that is overwhelming, and that command, if we begin to dissect that scripture, it's a demand. The scripture didn't say, "Would you please?" It didn't ask you, "Could you please honor your father and mother?" It's a command that says, "Honor them." And that command is not conditional. It doesn't say honor them if they're good to you. Honor them if they are present in your life. Honor them if they pay all the bills in the house. And no, there's no condition on the command. The command simply says honor. It's difficult. It's challenging. If you happen to be someone who never even knew your father, it's challenging if you happen to be someone who grew up in a home where the father may have been abusive. It's challenging if you have a father who may have been indifferent, and even though he was in the home, there was no connect. And so it is a command. It is a command given by God directly. It was a command. So it wasn't just a good idea. For those of you who follow the tenets of the faith, it is a command. How you do it is where the challenge begins. How do you go about honoring a father that abandoned you and your mother? How do you go about honoring a father that may have been abusive, even though he was in the home? How do you go about honoring a father that may have ignored you, even though you were in the home? How do you do it? How do you do it? And I think for each individual, if you are committed to honoring the scripture, you'll do what the Bible says, because I don't think nobody can tell you how to do it, but you'll have to seek and search for ways and figure it out as you go along, that what is the best possible resolve for you in dealing with this man who you may not have any connection with. What do you start? Where do you start? Nowadays we can text, and for most people it's easier to text than to talk or to call or to leave a voice note, or meeting face to face is like major if you could pull that off. But you have to figure out, if you were in any of those conditions that I mentioned, you have to figure out, where do I start? Where do I begin uh, to reach out? And you may be saying, well, he's the father. And I'm talking in particular to adults now, because again, he can't parent you anymore. You're grown. And so you may be the one who has to make that first step. You may be the one, if you can find him, or know of anybody who's connected to him, you may be the one who just sends a text today. He may not even know you because he left so early. And so you may literally have to introduce yourself to this person that they say is your father. But I'm saying to you, figure it out. You can do this. You can do it. You can do it with God as your help. And can I say this? Do it without having any expectations. Because if you have expectations, first of all, you don't even know what you're walking into. And so don't do it and sit in a seat of expectation, because then you're going to bring judgment immediately if he does not respond the way you expect it. And so now you understand why I'm saying do it without expectations. Just reach out if you're able to find a connection. You would have known at the end of the day, the record would have reflected in heaven and in earth that at least you made an attempt to honor this person. You made an attempt. How he responds after that, that's not on you. But you made an attempt to honor this father. Why? Because your days may be long upon the land which God gave you. And so it's so much about being able to push past the pain, the hurt. And if it's years, and this thing has been compiled for years, I'm not even pretending to say this could happen overnight. But I believe it can happen if you work towards it, if that is the true desire of you and you make a commitment to yourself. You know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to at least try without expectations, because if you build it up in such a way that he doesn't respond the way you expect, you're going to experience excruciating pain and hurt because you had expectations. And so it's better not to have any, and just to allow things to happen organically, as they say. Just allow it to flow and allow Holy Spirit to guide you. Okay, what do I say in this first text if you decide you're going to text him? Or what do I say on this first phone call? Or if you invite him out to lunch or dinner, or invite him to your home if you're an adult, like, what am I going to do? Like, that's super scary. That's super scary. But just think about the possibilities without putting the pressure on yourself or him for that fact that this would be a perfect reunion or union in that fact, and for that case if you've never met him before. So Newton says, Miranda, I never lived with my father. I lived with his brother for all of my life, at the age of 4 to about 18. Living with him and his family, never one day I had a regret. So if you would ask who is my father, I would say my uncle. Now I'm a father and I know how to love my 5 children and 11 grandchildren and a good thing at my side. That's awesome. And even in your biological father being missing, not there, Newton, look at God, that you were able to still be raised by an uncle who embraced you. And for you to come out as an adult saying, like, you never had a regret, that's awesome. That is absolutely awesome. So that means God placed you in a family that loved you unconditionally, that you didn't even feel the missing link of a father. So that's amazing. And a wonderful father that you are to your kids and your grandchildren, I'm sure, and of definitely your wife. Shout out to Violet tonight. So Edney says God has given you his DNA. You have a father. Absolutely. But that's our heavenly father. And people need earthly fathers connections at some point, and that's why God used a man to be joined to a woman so that they can be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, all that kind of stuff. And so people say that all the time. You have a heavenly father, and scripture says God is your husband and all that stuff. But sometimes let's just be honest and frank. You need a physical connection. And if we didn't, God wouldn't have created us and created all these people, these over 7 billion people on the planet. Because we need that physical connection at times, to feel like we belong to someone and we belong somewhere and we're connected. We need that. So I don't want to negate that fact for a minute. We need that physical connection, and that's why I'm saying, listen, if he's still alive, if he's still lucid in his right mind, you may want to reach out to him if you can find him. For those of you who've never had that connection, you may want to at least try. That's all I'm saying. So Inslee said, even if your father abandoned you, he is still your father, and you are to still respect and love him, because the Bible said a man who doesn't take care of his children is less than an infidel. So that would be on them. And God is still love. God will still love him and let God do the rest. Still love him and let God do the rest. Yeah. That's why I'm saying, do it without expectations as much as you're trying to make that connection the best way you know how. Like I said, whether it's a text, whether it's a phone call, whether it's an in-person meeting, whether it's a Zoom meeting nowadays, as all of us have come to be accustomed to living that way. Whatever it takes, but find a way. Find a way for your sake, for the sake of your children, if you have them, for the sake of your grandchildren, to cover those loose ends, to tie up those loose ends in your life. Because the thing is, we don't want to repeat negative cycles. It's okay to repeat a positive cycle, but we don't want to repeat negative cycles. We don't want to carry on generational curses. If there's anything that we can physically do to break them, that's what we should be doing. That's what we should, and baby steps, one step at a time. One step at a time. If you find someone who may have who may have an existing relationship with your father, Because there's always someone who you may have a certain perception of how this person was or is, and then there's always someone who would have an alternative view. There's always someone. And so, even if you can find that person and that person can be a mediator to bring the two of you together, then maybe that's something you could pursue as well. Maybe that's something you can pursue. So, Mom says great words of wisdom that can bring deep healing. Yeah, we want to be whole, whole, spirit, soul, and body. Spirit, soul, and body. And I always talk about that because it makes no sense if you're soaring and riding on the clouds in the spirit and all that stuff. And when you come back down to earth, your relationships and your interpersonal relationships are out of whack. And we hear the stories all the time of people who say people act one way in the church, and when they're outside, they don't act the same way. It's kind of like you're schizophrenic or bipolar or something because you have like these different personalities going on depending on the environment that you're in. It's so much better to be able to confront the demons, the things that haunt you. So if your relationship or lack thereof with your father, because we're talking about fathers today, if that is something that from time to time comes in your mind or regularly it haunts you that you didn't know your father or that he walked out on your mother or whatever the conditions may be, if that is something that bothers you, I would suggest one, if your mother is still alive, first of all, and they never discussed it, you may want to have a conversation with her first. You may want to have a conversation with your mother to actually talk about who your father was or is. How did they get together? Why did they get together? What were the conditions under which they got together? And if they stayed together, if they were married or had a relationship, what happened? Because we don't do those things. I'm telling you, when you begin to unearth the truth, yeah, it may get uncomfortable. It may get uncomfortable but sometimes, and we know that we have to experience pain in order to heal. We have to experience pain of when we begin to unearth things. But wisdom is the principal thing. As the scripture says, Proverbs 4:7, therefore get wisdom, and with all you're getting, get understanding. But the things need to be brought to the surface so that, again, the cycles are not repeated, the negative cycles. Curleen Davil says, thanks for sharing this. You're welcome, Curleen. So yeah, I strongly advise. I was fortunate, and I keep saying it, that while I had the opportunity to have some conversations with my parents as an adult, both sides, both mother and father on different occasions separately, that I got to ask them why about certain things. And trust me, it was uncomfortable and it was painful. And they didn't want to talk about them, the things that I was asking them, but I insisted because I wanted to know. I needed to know. I needed to know. And I don't even have kids and I'm not even married, but I needed to know. That would help me connect the dots in my own life. And by extension, it's helping me today to help others in their lives. And so nothing just happens, nothing is by accident. God is purposeful. The sum total of our lives, our backgrounds, the way we were raised, how we were even conceived was all God. Nobody just slipped into the earth realm and God didn't know anything about it. No two people connected, had sex, and then the mother conceived and God didn't know about it. It wasn't a secret. It didn't happen by accident, whether you were wedded or unwedded. It was not a secret to God. So no matter the conditions of your birth, it was still God. It was still him. Perhaps wasn't the ideal of what he originally designed, but he permitted it because he's the one who's all powerful, all knowing, omniscient, all that, right? So it was still God, still God. And that connection, that looking back, that understanding, that knowing is so important. It's so important for your children and your grandchildren to have a chance. Yeah. It's important for them to have a chance so that a generation, two generations, three, four generations beyond you, the same things are showing up in these people's lives, and they're showing up because you never addressed it. How about that? How about because you never addressed it as the adult? You never addressed it. And so the cycle continued. It's a major responsibility. It's a major responsibility. And as the scripture says, it's the truth that God requires from our inward parts. It's the truth he requires. And if you have that opportunity to have those conversations, y'all do it. Do it. So, hey, Sandra Lee, thanks for tuning in. She says a problem in most cases is we keep things in, but we need to open up. Absolutely. Whenever pressure, too much pressure gets inside of something, we know what happens. It literally bursts. Um, it's better to release, but you do it in wisdom, you do it in love. You just don't, especially if you have older parents or whatever the case is, you have to know how to approach them in respect and love. I began the conversation to perhaps get some answers. A lot of cases, they've been keeping it for so long, they probably don't even remember all the things that happened at this stage in their life, or they simply do not want to talk about it. And if they don't, that's unfortunate, but there's nothing you can do about it. And Elder Inslee says, I have 5 children and their fathers was not around. Um, I told them what happened between me and their father has nothing to do with them. So still respect him and love him because he's your father. And if he needs anything, you can do it for him, in essence. That's very mature. Unfortunately, a lot of women are not like that. They are not like that, but that's mature. Uh, Whatever happened in the relationship sometimes spills over on the kids. And two things happen that I've noticed with just personal friends that I know in their relationships with their parents. If the parents were separated, two things happen. Either the child, because of the mother telling them all the negative things that the father has done, not lying, but just telling her version of truth, the child either clings to the mother and pushes away the father and doesn't want to have anything to do with him, or the child clings to the father because of all the negative things that the mother says about the father. So sometimes that action, mothers can either push your child away from you or cause them to be drawn closer to you and cling on to you. So it works. It works either way. In some instances, or the child is really just in a position of neutral because they love, and that puts pressure on the child because they love both parents and they don't want to hurt either one. So what you're doing is putting pressure on that child because they don't want to choose one over the other. And when they begin to internalize that, that's going to create problems for that child because of you. And with you starting, it only takes a spark. And so the mature thing to do, as Inslee said, is to to say to the kids or whatever, your father and I didn't make it for whatever reason, but I don't want you to hold that against them, etc., 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 whatever that conversation may be. But just making sure that you don't put the child in that position where they feel like they may have to choose to either love their mother or love their father. That must be an awful position to be in. So fathers having those conversations, and the fathers that are lagging behind, and the women who fathers, the dads, they just don't show up. They don't do anything. That must be frustrating for you. But again, you can't control his actions, and you lashing out at him, you speaking negatively to him about the kids, your pie ain't no good, all that kind of stuff. You doing that still doesn't help the situation at all. Still doesn't help. Okay, these are things that I don't believe anybody has one particular answer for. But if you're a woman in that position where the father is not playing the role that he should play, that is something that you really have to seek help for and figure out how do I get him to do what he's supposed to do, because you can't. But how do I navigate through this without being bitter myself? Because I'm feeling the pressure of taking care of this child or children by myself, feeling the financial, feeling the emotional pressure and all that stuff. But how do I stay sane? How do I stay healthy? How do I maintain my composure in the midst of this person not fulfilling their own obligations as father? As a woman, that's the position that, if you find yourself in that position, that's what you need to figure out. How do I navigate through this without getting bitter, coming out better and figuring it out? So whether that's having, of course, prayer, having conversations with the right people, the right women who will give you wise counsel on how to manage, because perhaps they may have gone through it, or they may have a strategy that they can share with you. So aligning yourself with those kinds of people who can give you the right strategy at the right time to help you to get through it. But don't focus on trying to change that man. We already know only the one who created him can change him. Let me say that again. Only the one who created him can change him. Nobody else. And even the one who created him is not going to force him into a position of change. He has to want to change. He has to see the error of his ways. And so you have to know how to target your prayer and begin to shift and ask God to now begin to surround him and align him with people who would be able to positively influence him, and where he personally begins to see a need and a desire for him to play a role in his child or children's lives. So you would have to begin to shift your prayer in a certain direction and try, because all of these things work together for good. That's what we know. So just no one way. There's just no one way. People tend to just go pray about it. But there's just no one way. You can pray rather, but then there are techniques and things that you may also be doing in the interim while you're praying. You're putting some work to your faith, and while you trust and believe that things are going to change. So there's no one way. So mom says you could never be too old to ask why. Joba says teaching your sons to become good fathers is so important. Farida says prayer was my weapon of choice to get through those times. Yeah, yeah. That's essential for a believer. So that goes without saying. Uh, but I do believe that God has equipped us with so many other things that we can use along with prayer to get through these seasons of difficult times. As you navigate, can I say this to the women? Do everything in your power if you have sons not to coddle them, like keep them so close and tight under you. Because, yeah, you want them to love you and all that stuff, but don't be afraid to correct, to chastise, to give them the responsibilities that you can't teach him. They say women can't teach boys how to be men, but you can do your best. You can do what you know to be right. And again, what you can do from a male perspective, make sure that he's in those types of environments and involved in the types of clubs and extracurricular activities that have those positive men that are able to fill in the gaps that you can't. But don't keep him so close up. Don't make him a problem for the next woman. Okay? Don't make him a problem for a girlfriend or a wife because of certain things that you did or did not do in his life. So I always believe that when you're raising kids, if you think of them as little adults, in terms of you raising somebody who is one day going to be an adult, and you want them to be able to have the capacity to make good decisions in their lives when you're not around. Because when you're around, you can fill in the gaps, you can pick up the pieces, and you can do all that stuff. But it's when they're out of your presence, when they're adults, whether they in university or wherever, you want to be able to know that. And even if they make the wrong decision, but you want to be able to know that you have given them the capacity to make what they believe may have been the best decision at the time that they've made it. And you don't want them to, and this may go against the grain for some, but you shouldn't want them to call you for everything. Like every decision that they're calling you, that might seem flattering and everything, but what happens when you're not around? So it made me feel good that, child, my children call me for everything. They don't do nothing without me. That may sound good to some people and feel good and flattering for others, but what happens, God forbid, if you're not around? Are they going to be able to function without you? So if you're raising them in a way that that they can hold their own. And again, whether they make good or bad decisions, I'm more interested in the fact that they made a decision. They made a decision, and they don't fall apart when it's time for them to make a decision. That's what I'm more concerned about. Having the ability and the capacity to make decisions. And hopefully the best decisions, wise decisions, based on everything that you have trained them to do. Sandra Lee rather says, what do you do when you have prayed for 20 years, but the other person refuses to own up to the wrong and say sorry? In my opinion, give up. I agree with you to release it. Because again, you can't control somebody else's reaction or response to what you do. So if you've put in the work, you put in the work and you said you prayed, but they don't own up to what they have done, release it. Release it to God. That's nothing. You absolutely have done all that you are physically capable and spiritually, for that fact, if you're praying. You've done everything that you can do. So not give up, but release. Release it to God that, again, God doesn't override anybody's decision or choice. So even with the praying, if the person doesn't come to a place of submission or acceptance, it's not going to happen. So remember when I talked earlier about your prayer shifting? So what have you been praying in some instances? And maybe the prayer needs to shift in a different direction, or just release it. If you're done, just release it and allow God to do whatever he's going to do, because at the end of the day, the person still has a choice to make in terms of whether they want to resolve an issue. Because if they can't see themselves as being wrong, um, as not stepping up or doing what they were supposed to do, then nah, there's nothing that you can do. Good night, Denver. Good show. Very important. Let the mothers know this, that they cannot be a father to our boys. We love our mothers. Well, they're doing the best job that they can. And so, Denver, we talked about getting them involved in extracurricular activities where they can have male role models and mentors, whether that's Boys Brigade, Boy Scouts, or boys clubs, whatever organizations that exist that are targeted at young boys. And getting them, of course, involved in sports, because once they get coached, they get the discipline in some instances that they need, and that depends on if them having the right coach as well. So, yeah, mothers, they what they lack, that's where good male role models come into play to fill the gaps. Teresa says, I agree. It is a fine line that you have to walk as a mother when the child's father is not fulfilling his obligation, and you work hard to help maintain an open relationship between the child or children. Only with the help of God in your life can you do this. Correct. My point is, do what you know to do. That's right. So that the record reflects that you made an attempt. You can't do anything else, because again, you cannot force their hands into doing anything. But making sure that every opportunity that they can connect, you can do that as a mother. If he chooses not to embrace those opportunities, there's nothing what you can do about that. But you withholding the child, that's a problem. Especially if he wants to do. That's a problem if you're withholding the child. But if you make it possible and he doesn't take advantage of it, out of your hands completely. So Renee says, I try to teach my son how to treat a woman with love and respect, opens doors, buy small gifts, chocolate and flowers, compliments. I think mothers can definitely help their sons in this area. That's true. But you know what? I think what is the bigger thing is being able to learn who people are. And in essence, everybody has heard by now about the love languages, because everybody doesn't need gifts, but they like acts of service. They like you to spend quality time with them, whatever that may be. So once you teach them how to really take the time to get to know the person that they are involved with, once they get to know that person, they will know the things that person responds to, and then they can themselves respond in kind to that person. And so if she appreciates the gifts and the chocolates, I mean, everybody likes compliments and affirmations. Everybody. And that's across the board. And so that's important for women who are raising boys on their own, to really teach them how to treat women for real. Teach them how to treat women without saying to them, don't be like your father. Don't just telling him, don't be like him. But how about you teaching him what to do, how to respond, and then getting those men that will support you in your efforts as well. Okay, Renee says, when he comes to see me, I ask, honey, where's my gift? Because you love gifts. So a chocolate bar, a small things matter to women. Yeah, so yeah, you like gifts. And so if gifts is your thing, then yeah, bring it on. Renee, I got to say that some women would probably just appreciate the fact that the son came by, because she probably hasn't seen him or doesn't see him. So whether he brings a gift or not is secondary for her, because she's just happy that he showed up. And so for some people, that's enough. But you have to know who you're dealing with. So he ought to know by now. He need to bring you some chocolate or some flowers or some something because that's who you are and you love it. You love it. So yeah, you say, of course, I say to him, buy a small token for your girlfriend just so that she knows you were thinking of her. It's the small things that count. That counts. Yeah. So yeah, that's important. How you handle these boys that you are raising to become men who are going to hopefully enter into healthy relationships. But it starts with you in that home and how you handle and manage him, particularly if that father is missing. And even if the father is there, because I know people, and some of you have heard the shows of people who were raised in two-parent homes, but even though the father was physically in the home, he was emotionally absent. He was emotionally absent. And so his physical presence really didn't do much to help to frame and shape that little individual. Or if he was in the home and he was abusive, that's a whole other issue. And so it's just so important that mothers, those of you, that hand that rocks the cradle, guide your kids with all wisdom and doing as best as you can, because I know it's a challenge, but doing as best as you can not to bash that man, especially when he's not bringing anything into you to assist. Um, anything, not just financially, but that kind of support that you need when they may be acting out or whatever. Um, they have to be able to bring more than do what I say or a belt or something like that. With kids nowadays, they just show up and want to be the disciplinarian. Because I can tell you one thing: the kids, of course, they may not be bold enough to say it, but in their mind, they probably thinking, "So where he just come from? He doesn't even know what I'm dealing with, what I'm going through, and then you just want to show up and be a disciplinarian." So be careful about that too. When you're calling in these fathers, and because you're having challenges, and they just want to come in as this rough, tough something without even trying to talk things out. Discipline is important, but understanding people, I believe, is even more important than that. Because if you understand why they're acting the way that they do, you can be in a position where you can perhaps help to steer them in another direction. So that's very, very important. So for the fathers who are working, doing all that they can, and again, you can only work with the tools what you have. But if you're open enough to learn new techniques, to to join new groups, and seek information and all that kind of stuff, because if you have multiple children, you already know each one is different, different personalities, and the same type of disciplinary acts that work on one perhaps would not even phase the other one. Then that has you thinking, what else can I do? What else do I need to do? And I listen, hats off to all of you who are parenting children and grandchildren right now. Hats off to all of you. It cannot be easy when you're waking up each day and you're trying to figure out, who is this little personality that I am dealing with? And that do as I say thing, I think that went out the window a long time ago. So we know that don't work anymore. We know that there are children that are going to challenge every decision that you make every step of the way. And there are others again who perhaps would not say anything. But how do you handle that one? That's why we need our men. We need our men to bring in different perspectives. We need our men to be able to, sometimes they may be the stabilizer in the home if they're in the home, or even if they're not in the home, sometimes just them showing up, as we talked about earlier, their presence is so very important, and can kind of shift the whole environment, because that man is there, that father is there, that child knows that perhaps there are boundaries that they can't surpass with the father, that they attempt to, and sometimes go beyond with the mother. But some children know, when it comes to a father who's actively involved in their lives, that no, you can't do that. You can't do that. So Inslee says, you will also know a man by the way he treats his mother. If he treats his mother good, then he will know how to treat you. I've heard that. I personally can't attest to that, but if somebody else out there can attest to that, which one of you ladies out there are in a relationship, a marriage, whatever, where you've watched how your husband treats your mother with, care, respect, love, all that stuff, and you are experiencing the same thing in that relationship? Is there anybody out there who can attest for that? Because I hear that all the time. Watch how a man treats his wife, and I mean his mother rather, and you will know how he treats his wife, or it may be a reflection. So if there's any one of you who are actually living that, you're the living testimony to that statement, let me know. Monique says, "Hey, cuz it's not easy, but it's worth it. Worth it." Yeah. Okay. Juba says, "I understand this too well. I always tell my son to be proactive in his daughter's life." Yeah, it's going to definitely pay off. Pay off. If I didn't understand, I think if I didn't ask my father the questions that I was able to ask him over the years about his why, and what went wrong, and the choices that he made, and I, by no stretch of the imagination, I'm the typical child. Anybody, my parents, my siblings, they will always tell you that I was the inquisitive one. I always ask questions, a lot of questions. Thus, the choice of my career as a journalist, asking questions, that just came naturally, and by extension, what I do today. So I always wanted to stand and why people did certain things, why they acted, why I couldn't ask questions about why. Because sometimes I used to get shut down, you know, asking why I can't do something. Why can't I ask why? you know? So I was that child. I always wanted to know, and I didn't always get the answers, but I sure enough was going to ask because it was important to me. Okay. Um, So Sandra Lee says that's not always the case. He can treat the mother good. I guess that's what you're referring to, and still be a cheater. Okay. Okay. Dan Joba says, I absolutely agree with you. That was my husband. I'm not sure what you're referring to um, in that particular comment. But uh, yeah, so it's important, man. I think I'm spending the whole night just really saying to you, those of you who are not actively involved, have a father that's actively involved in your life, if he's still around, um, make an attempt. That's all you can do. Make an attempt. Those of you who do, continue to strengthen that relationship, and again, ask him some questions. Ask him some questions that, oh, ex-husband. Okay, I see what you're saying. So those of you who do, ask questions. The things that you may have wanted to know that you never knew. And then more importantly, those of you who are becoming grandparents, waiting to be grandparents or whatever, begin to have the conversations to tell those kids some things that they need to know. because it's going to help to frame the people that they will become when they have those answers. For some people, it's not important and it doesn't matter, but everybody isn't the same. And what's important is that for those that it does matter to, that if you have answers and you can help, it's important for you to help, and to be able to say that. So, wow, our time is, we're right at that mark. Thank you guys for hanging with me. I mean, we could talk all night, but this has been such. It's always good, and I appreciate each one of you who come and swerve with me week after week, and you pop in when you can, for the support. I want to, before I go, invite all of you. If you are not a member of my Swerve community, I please let me know if you're not in the community, because beginning June 28th through July 2nd, I'm hosting a masterclass on limiting beliefs and self-sabotage. What I'm going to do is explore all the things that we have done to hold ourselves back. And we may not have known. So this may be knowingly or unknowingly. So we're exploring limiting beliefs and self sabotage. Why aren't you as far as you know you could be? What are the things that are hindering you from making the next step? And it doesn't matter how old you are. What are the things that have been holding you back for so long and you're ready to release? So June 28th through July 2nd, but I'm doing it in this private Facebook community. So if you're not in that community, inbox me and let me know, because I'm going to be doing it live every night at 8 p.m. That's 8 Eastern, because you guys know I'm in Central Time, so I'm an hour behind. So that will be 8 p.m. Eastern, beginning June 28th to July 2nd. So it's the whole week. And it's only going to be about 30 to 45 minutes each night, because I want to help to push some people. I want some people to go past this thing of they're always on the verge of, and something is always about to happen, but the thing never happens. And so I want to help you to understand why that is happening to you, and then give you some tips on what you can do to push past, so that you're not potential anymore, your purpose. And so I want you to join me. If you're not in that community, let me know. I have something, I'm going to post it. You have to register, so I'll post it on my Facebook page tomorrow. If you look in the little stories box, you may see it. Register there. It's free. It's free, but I just want to keep track of the number of people that are coming in. And if you know of anybody, guys, if you know of anybody that needs to hear this and be a part of this, please invite them to register or let me know. And I will send them the invitation, because I want to be able to reach out to as many people as possible, so that we can push past the things that have been holding us hostage for far too long. And we can really begin to create not only the life that we want, but the life that we deserve, and walk in the purpose that God has called us to. God has not called us to be stuck. He's not called us to be stuck. So he wants us to make progress with every step that we take in our lives, no matter what our ages are. Yeah. So, okay, I see you. I'm definitely going to let you in. So if you know of anybody else, please invite them to join the community as well. It is a private community, so everybody just can't come in, but you have to let me know. But more importantly, if they register, I will definitely let them in, because I want to be able to help all of us to live the kinds of lives that we will not only be pleased and satisfied with ourselves, but that our light will shine, so that men see our good work. When they see our good work, and because they know who we are, God gets glorified, because they know what's happening in our lives could not be because we're so great and we're so awesome and we're so brilliant, but it's because the hand of the Lord is upon us, and we have an obligation to let our light shine. Okay, I see you, Monique. Okay, I will include you, sure. So listen, guys, So yeah, if you know of anybody else, please make me aware of it or let them know. Now the thing, when I let you in the group, then you can invite other people, but there's a registration. I'm gonna post that, like I said, and you'll see that. So yeah, that's gonna be June 28th through July 2nd. Tackling limiting beliefs and self-sabotage. So good night, everybody. Thanks for hanging with me. I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.